We'll get started. Melanie?
Hello, everybody. I am Dr. Melanie Davis. I am the Unitarian Universalist Association's Our Whole Lives Program Manager. It's a pleasure to be here today. And I would like to introduce my colleague, Mary Benard. Welcome.
Thank you, Melanie. Hi, everybody. I'm Mary Benard. I am the Publications Director for the Unitarian Universalist Association, and my office is responsible for the production of Our Whole Lives.
We're so happy to have you here with us today, Mary. We work so closely with you to have the Our Whole Lives resources available and updated and all of those things. And I know that many of us here today are maybe a little weary of change in our lives over the last few years. And Melanie has an opening reading for us this morning to kind of set the stage.
Exactly. And because sometimes unfamiliar can feel both exciting and uncertain, I selected a reading called Trusting Uncertainty by UU Minister Stephen M. Schick. Spirit of life, God of love, I have learned to trust the rhythm of your changing seasons. I delight in the certainty that each change, no matter how wrenching, brings with it the promise of new life. Yet in the affairs of my own days, there are times when I lose my trust in the rhythms of change. In those moments, I pray to be reminded of how the dawn follows night and spring arrives only after winter has lost its grip on reality. Here, in the uncertainty of the moment, help me accept change with the delight of a child coming of age or an elder embracing newfound wisdom. When I long for the comforts of what can no longer be, lift my head above my losses and my fears and cast my eyes on the promise of new beginnings.
Thank you. Oh, excuse me. I'm doing a lot of throat clearing this morning. Thank you so much, Melanie. Thank you for that perspective. And hopefully we can all embrace that today as we talk about some changes that are coming forth. So one of the things that we have heard from you and continue to hear from you all loudly and clearly is the need for updated materials. And we are so aware of that. And we have a whole webinar on why we do things the way we do and the whole process for revising Our Whole Lives and how robust it is and how long it takes. Mary came to us a while ago with a proposal to make things a little bit easier on that end of how we can make it a little bit less cumbersome to update things before we have to do a whole revision. So she's here today to talk to us about how that is going to happen, how we're envisioning that, and that we're planning on starting that with our K-1. So Mary, I'm going to hand it over to you to give us the scoop on all of that stuff.
Fantastic. Thank you, Amy. And thank you, Amy and Melanie, for working with me and fine-tuning the new plan here. It took several conversations to work out the kinks. So first, let me just kind of backtrack a little bit and just, say what the current publishing format for OWL is for those of you who might be new to this. For many years since we first started publishing OWL, we've had a kind of cumbersome format where we published for each level a book that is the secular Our Whole Lives, and then a separate book that is the religious spiritual component, Sexuality and Our Faith. And that book has had both a Unitarian Universalist half and a United Church of Christ half. And it was set up so that you facilitators had to actually take the pages out and follow the instructions and put them in the appropriate places in Our Whole Lives. Clearly, this is not ideal, not only because of the labor that is involved for all of you, but also because you're having to buy both halves when you maybe really only want one of them. So that was one of the things that we wanted to address. The other thing that we wanted to address was the fact that we had all of this physical inventory of the books. was very difficult to coordinate the inventory with needed updates. So the way we've been doing it is that when we start to run low on inventory based on the sales, we contact Melanie and Amy and say, do you want a new edition? Do you want to put in updates? And there's not always enough time for them to be able to actually do a good review and give us the updates before we run out of inventory. And so we've been sort of stuck in these situations where sometimes we don't have inventory of a level. And facilitators are out there sort of saying, what do we do? It has also meant that we're not able to make small changes in real time. So sometimes we need to update something because we've discovered something problematic in the book. Something has been called to our attention. And we're not at a point in the inventory where we're ready to reprint yet. So we don't know how to make that change. But that's a justice issue. Sometimes that change is really incredibly important. And maybe harm is being done while we're still using an old version of the book. So the plan we came up with is intended to try to address all of that. So let's see. The first thing to tell you all is that now, instead of having Our Whole Lives as one product and Sexuality and Our Faith with the two halves, the UCC half and the UUA half, as another product, now every level will have 3 products. One product will be only Our Whole Lives, just the secular book. The second will be the UU version of Our Whole Lives, which will have all of the UU Sexuality and Our Faith content integrated into the product. So you will no longer need to figure that out yourself and interleaf those together. And the same thing for the UCC half. So there will be Our Whole Lives, UUA version, and UCC version, which we hope will make your lives a lot easier. The second thing to tell you, and this is where it gets unusual, these will no longer be bound books. And this is all to facilitate easy updating. So what we're going to sell you instead is a package of shrink-wrapped, loose-leafed, 3-hole punch pages with a binder that is appropriately sized to fit, and a cover insert for the front and back and the spine, so you can make it look nice. With pages numbered per unit. And what that allows us to do is that when we need to make a correction, no matter how small or how large, we can publish the correction, and you can simply download the correction page PDFs and replace them in what you have. So corrections can happen quickly, in real time, responsively to what is going on in the world. It's much more just. If we find out that there's something wrong, we want that fixed as soon as humanly possible. That also means that we will no longer end up in these sort of out of stock situations where we don't have anything to give you while we're waiting for a reprint or a new edition.
Mary, I don't know if you're seeing all the happy
I
emojis
am.
and the hearts. One of the things, if I could just jump in, one of the things, so currently, when people disassemble the 2 manuals and assemble them, you might have a whole page of OWL activities, and then behind it, there's the SOF, but you've already kind of started the other activities.
Yes, exactly.
So what Mary is describing is that the Sexuality and Our Faith content will actually be integrated into the activity, and it will be marked so you can tell which part is Sexuality and Our Faith. So let's say, for example, there are normally 3 processing questions. So you'll see the standard 3 processing questions, and then another one that says SOF. And here's another point to consider regarding our faith tradition. And so those, and of course, as she said, there'll be an addition for that for UUs and an addition for UCCs.
Correct. And also, I understand that UUs may sometimes want to incorporate some of the UCC material and vice versa. And so we will also make available free PDFs that are just that added sexuality and our faith content for each tradition. So that, for instance, if you have the Unitarian Universalist version, but you also want to just not buy the whole book again to get the UCC version, you can just look at that added UCC content and decide what to bring over. The correction pages will all be posted on the OWL portal on the UUA website and also on the UCC OWL portal. And if you join the appropriate forums, you will get automatic notifications when a correction has happened. So all you will need to do is just log in, find that correction, print out the appropriate page or pages, and stick them right in. If the corrections don't line up with the pagination, we've come up with a page numbering system so that you can still just insert them directly in. We'll make sure that we line them up so you don't have to do any kind of like crossing out of a portion to avoid repetition or anything like that. We'll make it work.
Mary, we're getting some questions about the OWL portal.
Yes, of course.
So we're working on that. Don't go looking for it yet. So currently what we have is, for example, on the UUA's page, and Amy has a similar resource on hers, the facilitator resources page. And that's where you can subscribe to this webinar, to the OWL newsletter, get recommended updates, all those things. That will be reorganized. And we're using the word portal because makes sense to us. Our programmer says that's not the right term, but we're using it anyway. It's a cool word. But you will go there, and then when you purchase this new edition, there will be a link that will allow you to sign up for updates.
Yeah, and I just want to also say we're getting some questions in the chat, and I neglected to say at the top end of the webinar that if you have questions, please use the Q&A feature. It's so much easier for us to track than scrolling through the chat. We don't want to miss your question, and the Q&A will keep them front and center for us. So if you popped a question in the chat, if you please go put it in Q&A, that would be great.
Yeah, and I don't think I'll be using the entire allotted time, so I think there will be plenty of time for questions at the end too. One thing about putting all of these resources on the OWL pages on the UUA and the UCC site is we're also going to, over time, make those pages more robust, and we're going to be putting other things there as well. So we're thinking about things like putting PDFs of handout packets there, and putting posters there, putting links to the resources that are mentioned in each level so that you can have something to click on, which you can't in a printed thing. We might put videos there that go along with OWL or address something that is coming up. So that we're looking to kind of build that all out. And for the time being, while we're getting it going, that is all just going to be freely available. You'll be able to sign up for it when you purchase OWL. In future, as that site has more and more to offer you, we may make it a subscription site to pay for all of that. But for now, we're not worrying about that. What else do I want to tell you? We will still do whole new editions as needed. So this doesn't mean that we won't periodically, and Melanie and Amy are going to take the lead on this, decide now is the time to do a complete overhaul of the level. So this isn't replacing that. It doesn't mean that we never do that holistic review of each level. It just means that we don't go out of inventory in the meantime. It will also be much easier for you all to know if you have the most current version, because you can be keeping it current yourself. So one of the questions we often get is, I bought OWL X number of years ago. Is the version I have the right one? And this way you will always have the right version. as long as you keep up with the updates and pay attention to those notifications when you get them. I think might be my whole spiel. I may have forgotten something. I'm happy to answer questions.
Yeah, so we do have a few, and I know we're still working on this system, y'all. So we invite you with all sincerity to throw tons of grace and patience our way as we figure this out. And I am sure, just based on how things happen in the world and past experience, that there will be things that are bumpy along the way, and you will tell us and we will respond. So we thank you for that in advance. And we do have a few questions. So a couple people are asking about how they'll get notified about the changes. So our hope is that when we have this set up and you click to be notified when there are updates, that you would get an email notification that there are updates, and you would need to go and get them and download them from the site.
Yes.
Is that right, Mary?
Yep, that's right. And I actually forgot to add that we're also planning to put a running list of the updates with links. So at any given time, you can go to the site and check. So you can go see what the last updates were and when they were made, and decide for yourself if you've missed any and still need to add them.
I am not sure what to do about that volume, Sarah, but thank you for lifting that up. I also wanted, another question that somebody had is, how soon will these come out? And what is your recommendation of what we do with the hard copies of the old versions? So we're not rolling this out for all the levels all at once. We're going to be starting it with the revisions, and the first revision that will be affected by it will be the new K-1 second edition. So that's what's happening. And then as other things get revised, so the next one will be 1012. It will be in that format. And then as we move on, we will, that's the plan right now. So stay tuned that's how we're going to do this.
For those of you who have pre-ordered the K-1 edition, the first thing that you'll be getting is a PDF that you can work with, and that will only be the Our Whole Lives content. We are still completing and working on the Sexuality in Our Faith content. So when you get your PDF, don't say, "Oh my gosh, it's not included." We didn't forget it. We're just trying to do this incrementally.
Yes. And I would love to be able to give you a publication date for OWL K-1. Problem is, as many of you probably already know, supply chain issues are still affecting production of anything. So printer schedules are kind of the Wild West right now. And we won't actually know until we deliver the book to the printer what kind of delivery date they're going to give us. But it is underway. In my fondest hopes, I hope that we will have it by the new year. But can't really promise anything at this point, which is why we're making the PDF available for now.
So we are keeping a list of everyone who has pre-ordered K-1. If you purchase yours, please send me your receipt, a copy of your receipt. You can just forward the email that you get from the bookstore, or the email you can send to either to Amy or me if you order from UCC Resources, and we'll make sure that you get the PDF as soon as it's in our hands.
There's a couple of questions in the Q&A. One is, will this mean that purchasing all new materials for each level? We usually purchase multiple copies. Well, we need to purchase multiple copies in this instance. So like we said, we're not taking existing material and moving it to this format. We're taking it as we come with new revisions and new additions. So it would be a situation where you would want to buy the most updated version anyway. So yes, you're going to purchase new material in a new version a new edition so that you would have the most updated, and then it will be in this format.
Right. And this is still going to be print. So think of it in terms of whether or not you want multiple copies, the same as you would if it was a bound book. If you would be buying multiple copies of the bound book, then by all means you should do that here, because it's still a physical print thing.
Regarding the question of what do we do with,
free.
regarding the question of what do you do with your old copy? You know, that on the one hand, sometimes people want to say, you know, here's a gift. I have this curriculum, and there remains good material, even if some of it's outdated. But the reason that we update these things is because harm sometimes is done when we don't talk about certain, you know, we don't talk about trans people and intersex bodies and whatnot. So, so use your judgment about how or whether you pass along your curriculum. Sometimes it's just better to recycle it and replace it with the newest edition.
There's a question about going forward. Will the OWL K-1 packet of pages also have the sexuality and faith K-1 pages? So they'll be in one packet and binder. So yeah, there are going to be 3 different versions. So people will choose if they're going to buy only Our Whole Lives, or if they're going to buy Our Whole Lives with UU Sexuality and Our Faith, or Our Whole Lives with UCC Sexuality and Our Faith. So all of those, there will be 3 different products. Right now we have 2, right? We have Our Whole Lives and we have Sexuality and Our Faith that has both UU and UCC. So this will be moving to 3 products, and people can choose. And then there will also be a free download of only the Sexuality and Our Faith for each of the denominations, that people could have a free download of that if they wanted.
We're aware that some facilitators don't incorporate sexuality and interfaith. You know, it is important to have the secular version because schools use it, correctional facilities use it. You know, there are lots of reasons why people want the secular edition. But one of the gifts of Our Whole Lives is the sexuality and interfaith material. It's co-published by 2 religious organizations very proudly. And this incorporation of the material will make it seamless to include the material that puts the secular sex ed into the context of each of our faith traditions. So we are hoping that the ease of use really helps people give this gift of faith-based sex ed to their participants. You always have a choice. You know, you can skip over the content that you want to skip over, but it will be there. So it'll be easier to use and incorporate.
Another question is asking about the estimate for the 10-12 level. We get asked that a lot.
Yeah.
And someone's asking because it's informing their thinking process about offering it this year or waiting until next.
Right. Well, you're not going to offer it this year.
Not 2022. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah,
so,
they may be thinking program year. So
yeah. So we did post some recommended updates, which you can find in our facilitator resources areas. My suggestion would be that you wait until next year. And it's on me. You know, I have, you know, had other priorities throughout the pandemic. And this year we have been focused on creating online facilitator trainings, which actually for me and Amy added about 1/3 of our work hours has become consumed by these online trainings. So apologies that it's not in your hands yet, or it's not in Mary's hands yet, but our jobs, the nature of our jobs with Amy and me being the sole proprietors of the OWL programs, is that we have to set priorities. And so, so my goal is to get it to Mary as soon as I can, but just like she can't promise, I can't promise, because every time I think I'm going to sit down and finish editing it, there's fires to put out and there's other priorities. So I'm doing my best. We will get it to you. And we know that it's well overdue.
So I'm in terms of, are we talking about calendar year, program year? Well, definitely calendar year. Like it's not gonna, you're not gonna have it in time to do it in 2022. However, if we can't guarantee, it's not far enough along in the process like K-1 where we can say you're going to have a PDF by November 1st. Like we can't say that yet. So I'll leave it up to you whether you offer it this year or not. We will. And again, we appreciate all the grace, all of it.
But remember, if you do want to offer it before the PDF of the new edition is available, or the new edition itself is available, definitely incorporate the recommended updates. We caught the worst things that we needed to fix, and you can incorporate those.
And those are available both on the UUA.org and UCC.org. If you go to the OWL pages there, you'll see facilitator resources on the left-hand side of the UUA page. And then if you go to the very bottom of the UCC.org page, you should see that. When will the PDF be available for K-1? Melanie and I have committed, and Mary, we have committed that by November 1st, come, excuse my language, hell or high water, you will have a PDF. And our hope is it will be the exact version of what you will get when things are printed. There may be still a few tweaks that will change. So you will still need to purchase you would only get it if you've pre-ordered the K-1. Yeah. Right.
And we're on track for that right now.
Great.
It is at the typesetter as we speak.
Yay.
Yay. Next question. I am planning to begin K-1 until 10-12 in February. Should I order those both now at the bookstore to be kept up to date? So K-1, yes, absolutely. 10-12. I think this maybe came in, this question came in before Melanie made her disclaimer about when 10-12. So we don't know that we'll have 10-12 by then. So you might want to wait. And in the meantime, if you have the first edition, to incorporate those recommended updates for sure. For sure. Next question, please repeat the directions and reasons for sending a receipt to Amy or Melanie. Okay.
Oh, well, that's so that you can get the PDF. The bookstore isn't handling PDFs. They handle just the book. So when it's in the warehouse, you'll get the actual binder ready materials. In the meantime, we're offering you a PDF so you can start running your program. And we're not making that free to the public. So just go to the bookstore, either UCC Resources or the UUA Bookstore, pre-order K-1, email me or Amy your receipt, and we'll make sure that you get the PDF by November 1st.
Yeah. So another person is saying, and this is a good clarification, somebody is saying, so in the future, we'll be purchasing virtual electronic versions of the curriculum. Yes, no. And so we're not saying that it's all going to be a PDF forever, and then you can just print out multiple copies. That is not the case. What you'll be purchasing is a shrink wrapped set of pages that you can put in a binder. And so that's still hard copy. It's just not a bound book. And what that does is it makes it super easy. Well, I don't know, super easy. That might be a little bit of an overstatement, but much easier for us to change. If something on page 47 is a problem, then we can fix that and get you a new page 47 without having to reprint the entire book. So that would be the part that you would get in electronically, is you'd get a notification, hey, there's an update in K-1 on page 47. Go to the portal, the page, whatever, to find your update. So you can, that is what you would print. And if you have 5 copies of the curriculum, then you would print 5 copies of that page 47 and switch it out in each of your copies.
One of the, we do get a lot of requests for electronic versions of the manuscripts. And I'll tell you what, Amy and I provide electronic copies of the training manuals, for example, to OWL trainers. And sometimes they'll say, well, just tell us what page the change is on. Well, you know what happens when you get in there and you make one change, there's often a change on another page, and it becomes this rabbit hole. And it becomes a lot of work to just say, to create a whole new document every time. And to track which version, I've probably got 6 versions of the online training manual for all adults that we're just started. And you have to track which version you're on. So this is actually going to be the simplest system, rather than having multiple electronic copies out in the world. It's important to us too, to not release everything out into the world where we can't manage the corrections. We want to be able to say, look, stop using page 54. That's not okay anymore. Here's the new page 54. And if we've given everybody electronic copies, we really can't control that as much. So it's our commitment to try to continue having the most accurate content we have and the most justice-oriented content we have, is by allowing us to retain as much ownership of the material as possible.
Thank you. Somebody is asking, will there be an online training scheduled for elementary levels once the new curriculum is out? So we have already actually given our trainers this fall, our elementary trainers, a rough draft copy of the new second edition of K-1, and they are already incorporating that information into their trainings. So if you have taken an elementary training pretty much, I think, since August of this year, you have had some information and possibly even a peer facilitation group that incorporated some of the new K-1 material. There are online trainings, elementary trainings. We have one that we're scheduling for January. And there are a couple other ones throughout 2023. So those things are easier for us to update because our training manuals are a PDF. So we can fix that and update that quicker. Not to say it's easy, but it's easier. We can fix that and do that quicker than we can the printed materials for you to use with the children and youth and families and adults in your congregations.
I would like to jump in and say that Amy and I both did a couple in-person trainings in August and early September, and we've gotten to share at some of these trainings the new illustrations for the K-1 edition, and they're just beautiful. They are multi-generational, multi-orientational. That's not a word. They share different family structures. There are different nationalities and ethnicities of people represented, different kinds of bodies. They are just beautiful. And these illustrations are actually part of the curriculum as opposed to in separate books. Now, there's also a whole range of newly recommended books, but these beautiful illustrations are actually incorporated into the curriculum for sharing with the children. And when we got to show them to the participants in the Labor Day training, there was such excitement in the room to see this new artwork.
Yeah. And I just thought of another thing to explain that is a benefit of this new approach, which is that when we had sexuality and our faith in a different book than Our Whole Lives, one of the things that could happen, and sometimes did happen, is that we would have a new edition of Our Whole Lives, but we didn't yet have the corresponding new edition of Sexuality and Our Faith, and so they didn't line up. This will also address that, because if we fix one, we can fix them all at the exact same time.
We have just got, I love how engaged everyone is and how many questions they have. I think it's telling us the level of excitement that people have about this fabulous idea, Mary. So timeline for updating the other age groups too. So Melanie and I, we have this, we like to dream big, and we're like, boy, we wish we had like a staff of 10 writers that worked for us, and we could just do this all the time. What we have come to realize is that Our Whole Lives is consistently and constantly in some state of revision for some level somewhere. We are also aware that we bit off a little bit more than we could chew in this pandemic times when we had 3 levels under revision at the same time. K-1, 10, 12, and young adult has just started its revision. The only levels that have not had a revision to date are the adult and older adult. The older adult is the most recently published. So we are looking at that, and then we had begun our revision process with the levels that by how often they are used, how many people use them. So for instance, the 7th through 9th grade curriculum already has a 2nd edition that was published in 2014, which was a big deal at the time. And we are aware, yes, that was 8 years ago now. So, so that's the one that we started with because that's the one that's most frequently used. So we're doing them kind of in order of use. And we know that we'll get back around to that as we go on. And we're looking at how we can do that the most effectively, still keeping an integrity with our process, which is an original draft being critically read by readers for racial justice, ability justice, and gender justice, then having that material, that feedback incorporated into revisions, then having that field tested, and then coming back and incorporating that feedback before we have a final version. So that's the process that we work with, and it takes a while because we are so committed to the fidelity of the program. And our workaround, like we said a few times already on this webinar, is that we have recommended updates for those versions that are still in the bound book copies. And those are available on both ucc.org and uua.org. And you just print out a list. Some of them are pages long of recommended updates, and you can correct your own copy before there's a new edition for that.
And I'm going to put a plug in as part of, since Amy mentioned the field testing, we will be wanting field test sites for the young adult edition, probably late next spring, early next summer. So email me. You can reach me at owl@uua.org or mjdavis@uua.org, and let me know if you'd be interested in being a field test site for young adult. And by that, we are looking at ages 18 to 35.
Right. And actually, maybe this is a good place to say that we are working on an intermediate printing of young adult before the new edition that will actually incorporate that list of recommended updates directly in. And I expect, again, supply chain issues with the printer. It's hard to say exactly when, but I'm hoping within a couple months that will be ready. So stay tuned for announcements.
So thank you. That was just the next question. You just answered that. Thank you, Mary.
Sure.
And if you do pre-order it, you get the PDF by November 1st. If you're really like, oh my gosh, we have to do this programming this year, I already put it on the calendar and we've got parent orientation scheduled and all that kind of stuff, you would have a workable copy of it. So know that. And yes, this next question is, does 4.6 remain the same? 4.6 was actually updated in 2017. I know that's 5 years ago now. And we do have some recommended updates for it as well until it gets back around in it's turn to have another edition. Let's see. Keeping law material current uses the same process to update. So I know that's a good process. Oh, thank you. We get kudos from the former librarian. Yay.
Awesome.
What's the best way to find these trainings? Checking with the website hasn't been a good fit for us.
That's the only way to do it, folks. Amy and I don't have the capacity to manage mailing lists for training interest. So you do just have to check the calendar. They are updated as the next update we're going to be doing we add some trainings, like the in-person trainings get added as soon as people send us the forms. The online trainings for next year will probably show up within a week or two. We're working on updating that calendar. Somebody asked about November training. When will they be notified about the November training? Those emails have already been sent out. So look in your spam folder, because I notified, for example, I notify the UU folks, Amy notifies the UCC folks. Your applicants would have received an email that either said, hey, you're in, here's the payment link, or sorry, you didn't get in. I will say that we had so many applicants for the November training that we did something that we do not plan to do on a regular basis, but we added a third training for November. So 2 for the East Coast folks and 1 for the Pacific Coast, because there was greater need in the East Coast. So we were able to double the number of people who got into the training. Amy allows us to have any slots that might not fill on the UCC side. So we got in a few more people there. I think I was able to get in everybody except 7 people on the wait list. So if your folks haven't heard anything or you haven't heard anything, check your spam. You can email me also. Or sometimes people think they applied, but they didn't hit that final submit button. So we actually never received the application.
I want you to go and double check the dates for the online January training, but I'm pretty sure that it's going to start the week of January 9th.
Yeah.
And there are always 3 weeks of Mondays and Thursdays and a final Saturday. So with a January 9th start date, the end date would be January 28th. And we are working around Monday holidays. So in the case of the January training, there will be 1 Tuesday class because of Martin Luther King Jr. Holiday on Monday the 16th. So there,
and that's true for November also. There's a Tuesday because of a holiday in November. It's a Tuesday start, I think.
But we are hoping to get those up in the next week or so, those 2023 dates. Okay, let's see. There is an online, yes, there is an online, there will be an online elementary training in January for grades K-1 and 4-6. That is true, that you can apply for.
And we're going to continue rolling them. So it's elementary, secondary, elementary, adult, elementary, secondary, elementary, adult.
Yeah.
So we're going to keep rotating them, and we're keeping our eyes on participation and interest. So far, there's more need for the elementary and secondary trainings than adult. So we're not going to be offering as many adult trainings online as in person. And
we're still also seeing quite a few in-person trainings coming up. We had, I think, 25 or so in-person trainings this summer from in different places all over the country, from East Coast to West Coast to Midwest, North, South. Not as many. We used to have 65 to 70 every year. We're not back up to that yet, but we are seeing quite a few folks do in-person training. Many of them still require masks, require proof of vaccination, even some requiring testing every day. But there are ways to have those in-person trainings, and some people are feeling okay about hosting them, and some people are feeling okay about attending them. Other people aren't, and we're still going to continue with our online trainings, but those have pretty limited spots. So so we're glad to see that we have kind of multiple platforms of things going on.
Oh, someone did just posted, I just rescheduled an elementary training in Milwaukee for January 20th, the weekend of January 20th. So that will show up on the calendar shortly. Again, there's some inquiries about when things start and will they get an email? No, you won't get an email. You have to keep checking the calendar, folks. Sorry.
I will say, though, that if you sign up for the Our Lives newsletter, which comes out usually quarterly, this third quarter slipped into the beginning of the fourth quarter, but it has a link on there for the training calendar. So if you need like a tickler every quarter, you can sign up for that newsletter. You can do that at ucc.org/OWL. And you'll find the form to just put your name and email address in there, and you'll be added to the list. So you'll get the next one. If you want the one that just went out and you're not on the list, you can email me and I'll be happy to forward it to you. But that would be once a quarter, you would get that, and you get a link to the training calendar. So if you need like a little, oh, I need to remember to check that, that's something that you can do.
So there's a question about becoming a trainer of facilitators. Let's put it that way. So we have the trainers, or the people that Amy and I sort of hand select to represent the UCC and the UUA in the training of facilitators. And the facilitators are the people who actually implement the program in congregations and churches and other settings. So we very rarely have trainings of trainers because we kind of have enough folks in our list, but we're very specifically looking to add more UCC trainers, more trainers who are Black and people of color and Indigenous folks, more people sometimes in the middle of the country. We have fewer trainers there. We need some more trainers in Canada. So it's not like everybody who applies gets in. We really are trying to fill the gaps in our trainer pool. One of the things that we do look for is we want people who have already facilitated some level of our whole lives. So they really have a familiarity with how the process works, both being trained and using the program. The trainings used to be like you were an elementary trainer or a secondary trainer or an adult levels trainer. Now our model is that when you take a training, you become trained for all of the levels at once. And that gives us more flexibility, and it gives hosts more flexibility as they're trying to find trainers. So that will be a vast improvement. We do anticipate having another training of trainers within the next year or so. We don't have a date yet because these things are expensive. So we have to find funding to do it. It's at least a 4-day process to learn everything that you need to know to be a trainer. And it's not just learning about our whole life. It's not like a glorified facilitator training. It's really learning how to be a trainer, learning how to assess people who want to be facilitators, learning to have hard conversations sometimes when there's a participant in the room who is maybe not showing much promise and you really want to help them succeed, or they're breaking boundaries all over the place and you have to call them in or call them out for that. So that's kind of what we're going to look for. If you want to do anything to sort of prepare yourself to apply, I would say become trained to facilitate and get some experience with facilitating our whole lives. And now you kind of know who we're looking for. It doesn't mean we're not going to choose anybody from the West Coast or the East Coast, or we're not going to necessarily choose somebody who's white, but it means that we are looking to create a directory, if you will, of a pool of trainers who represent humanity and who are disabled and trans and UCC and UUA. And we also choose people who are community, which means anything other than UU or UCC. Some of our most popular trainers are not necessarily from our faith traditions. So there isn't a hard line in terms of that identity.
I do want to lift up a couple things because it's just come up lately in a couple of trainings, and that is that, any Our Whole Lives training you go to, they'll be different because you have different trainers with different styles, but there are some things that will be the same. The information covered should be pretty much the same. And we encourage, so this is coming from us, we encourage our trainers to use both UCC and UUA resources because trainings are open to all the people. So most trainings are open, and most trainings have UUA and UCC and sometimes community folks in them. So when resources are used from different faith traditions, we just ask that you be open and listen. And if that's not your faith tradition, that's fine. You don't have to use that particular resource, but just to know that there are different faith traditions that approach this work and hold it sacred. So just know that that's something that is hopefully a part of each and every Our Whole Lives training.
Mm-hmm.
We have another question here, clarifying someone not trained for 7, 9, 10, 12, but trained pre-2020 and all the other curricula, would that person still need a 7 through 9, 10 to 12 training? So, we highly recommend it, even though there's overlap, right? There's overlap in the values and in the music and in the circles of sexuality. What we do know is that each training, in an elementary training, we're focusing on how do you engage parents and work with children to provide developmentally appropriate sexuality education. In the 7 through 9 and 10 through 12 training, you're going to learn about how do you do that with adolescents. And there's some differences between working with young children and working with adolescents. And then in the all adult levels, you're going to be looking at that same thing. I'm like, how do you take all this material, even if it's familiar to you in some ways, and do that with adults, do that with peers, do that with people a little bit younger or a little bit older than you are. So there are some things that are the same, yes, and there are some very pointed differences in each level of training. So we do encourage you to take those. It is helpful to be in a training and spend time with folks who are focusing on that age level that you're going to be teaching.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
Somebody is asking, are Disciples of Christ people still involved in OWL? There are some folks who are. It's not, we don't have a denominational partnership with that denomination, but we have folks from many different Christian denominations that take our whole lives trainings. Disciples are one. We have Presbyterian folks, Lutheran folks, Methodist folks, all different kinds of denominational people at local church levels avail themselves of our whole lives trainings from time.
And trainings also attract people from Planned Parenthood, people who work. The last training I did had somebody who works with preschools. So we really never know who's going to sign up.
Yeah, and we don't have, somebody's asking about state agencies. So we know of some schools that use our whole lives. Sometimes they're independent or charter schools, which have more flexibility in their programming and timing. In terms of state agencies, some people do offering it as it's a program in its entirety. I'm not aware of state agencies that do that, but using our whole lives as a resource for how they work with children and families, certainly there are many places that are doing that.
And Our Whole Lives is on the approved curriculum list for the states that welcome comprehensive sex ed. So Washington State, for example, I believe it's on California's, I know it's on Oregon's. So in those states, the school districts have a list of approved curriculums, and then each district gets to choose which one they're going to use, whether they use it in whole or in part. And so, it can be used in any, what I say when I preach about Our Whole Lives is OWL can be used in any setting in which the OWL values are honored. And if any of those values, like if you can get on board with everything except justice and inclusion, you don't want all that gay stuff in there, this is not the curriculum for you, because justice and inclusion is part of the music of Our Whole Lives.
Yeah. I think we're going to take one last question here, which is, are organizations that are not nonprofit allowed to charge participants for OWL training? And, people that offer Our Whole Lives in churches sometimes do charge folks to take Our Whole Lives. There are many, many models for that. People make their own decisions about that. Some churches say, this is part of our religious education. We don't charge for any other religious education, so we don't charge for OWL. Other people have a sliding fee type of scale and say, this donation that you're making will help us to send more people to get trained, will help us have a sexuality education library in our church, those kind of things. Some people offer scholarships, some people don't. Some people charge everybody $25. I think the most we saw, Melanie, one time we saw like some church was charging like $600.
It was amazing.
Really steep. We thought, wow, that's amazing. You have people for whom that is just seems like a regular thing they could do. So, so there are many, many ways that people choose to offer this as a ministry, and in their communities, depending on what their sort of faith culture is and how it works for them, and what their budgets are, and where they might need some help in having funding for continuing the program and the ministry.
There are also congregations that have sort of an in-house program, and they also sponsor one in their community. So when they do it in-house, they incorporate sexuality in our faith. And when they offer it in the community, they offer just our whole lives. And whether they charge for that or not is, again, what Amy was saying. It's part, what's your mission? Well, I will say that questions like that are really helpful to ask on the OWL facilitator email lists, which we are moving into a system of forums shortly. People will be automatically, if you're subscribed to the OWL email list, you'll automatically moved into a forum. If you go to uua.org and type email lists in the search bar, you'll see 3 OWL related lists. OWL Child. So if you're trained or you're managing a program in the elementary levels, sign up for OWL Child. Use OWL L if you're secondary and high school, middle school and high school level, or OWL Adult, of course, for all the other levels. Perfect question. Hey folks, I'm new here. What do you charge, if anything, for people to take your OWL program? For those of you who are running a program or supervising a program and are members of Loretta, you can ask on the Loretta listserv, or you could go to the Facebook page for the UU Religious Educators and ask the question there. If you ever have any questions or concerns about the content of the trainings or the material, please email Amy and me directly. Social media is not the place to have those conversations, and email lists likely aren't, because everybody weighs in an opinion, and frankly, we're the only people who have an official opinion.
Well, here we are at the top of the hour. Can you join us in just shouting out your thank yous in the chat for Mary and all the work that she's doing for us? And really, this was her idea, and we're so excited about this new format. Please do pre-order K-1, Our Whole Lives. You can do that either through the UUA Bookstore or uccresources.com. And we promise you, if you do that, a PDF by November 1st. And as soon as the supply chain, God's, goddesses, spirits, energy, universe is with us, we will have our first new format, second edition of K-1 for you, hopefully in the early new year.
Amy, would you like to introduce our speaker for next month?
Yes, we are so excited. If you do not know Martha Kempner, she's a health educator, and she has a very, I don't know what a good word is, sassy body kind of email newsletter that she sends out. It's called Sex on Wednesday. And she keeps track of crazy political things that are going on and other stories that have sexuality education crossovers in them, and is a funny, sarcastic kind of tone to it. And she will be joining us on Wednesday, November 2nd, for Sex on Wednesday on OWL Taking Flight. So we hope that you will join us for that, and we will get that registration link up in the thank you for today that many of you receive. If you clicked it's okay to get email from the UCC, or it will be up on our respective websites soon. So thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for all your really wonderful questions. We appreciate you.
Thank you. Bye, Mary. Thanks.